Kalorama, a recorded books/Highbridge imprint, presents Awakening to China's Rise, European Foreign and Security Policies Toward the People's Republic of China. By Hugo Meijer, read by Nigel Patterson. Introduction. Europe's Awakening to the Rise of China. For a long time, the major European powers looked at China through predominantly economic lenses, as a faraway market that offered tremendous opportunities. In the 1990s, France's relations with the People's Republic of China, PRC, found their main and perhaps only raison d'être, as a declassified diplomatic cable puts it, in the pursuit of our economic interests and our influence on a huge market with great potential. Accordingly, the aerospace corporation Airbus agreed to transfer dual-use manufacturing technologies and production lines used in the making of A320 wings components to the state-owned China Aviation Industry Corporation, AVIC. Germany, for its part, aggressively pursued economic opportunities in this vast emerging market, becoming the economically most successful European country in China, and more broadly in the Asia-Pacific. A case in point was the German car company Volkswagen, VW, which enjoyed the first-mover advantage in China and, by the mid-2000s, reached a local market share of more than 30%, becoming China's leading car maker. Likewise, after the retrocession of Hong Kong to the PRC in 1997, the United Kingdom's approach towards Beijing was, in the words of one official, one of engagement, engagement, engagement. Fast forward 2 decades later, however, and Europe's 3 major powers had all developed an Indo-Pacific strategy, bolstered their diplomatic and security presence in the region, hardened their stance towards Beijing, established screening mechanisms to monitor and block Chinese investments in Europe, and imposed restrictions on the supply of 5G telecommunications equipment by Chinese companies like Huawei. What explains this stark policy shift? To address this question, this book examines how Europe's major powers, France, Germany, and the United Kingdom, have responded to the national security challenges posed by the rise of China since 1989. The re-emergence of China as a great power and the intensifying United States-China competition have marked the return of great power rivalry in world politics, with wide-ranging implications for Europeans. In particular, 3 overarching trends have provided the context within which the major European powers have confronted China's rise. For one, in the light of the shifting center of strategic gravity of world politics from the Atlantic to the Asia-Pacific, the gradual retrenchment of the United States from Europe since the end of the Cold War, coupled with growing doubts about the credibility of U.S. commitments to the continent, has incited Europe's major powers to increasingly provide for their own security. Furthermore, sustained by expanding economic, military, and technological capabilities, the PRC has displayed an ever more assertive foreign policy, both in the Asia-Pacific and in Europe since the 2010s, which impinges upon a broad range of European diplomatic, security, and economic interests. Thirdly, the rising global competition between the United States and China has become a structural feature of great power politics in the 21st century, with ramifications across different regions, including Europe. In short, stuck between a rock and a hard place, the major European powers increasingly doubt the robustness of the U.S. allies' commitment to their security, while grappling with China's expanding clout and influence in the larger context of mounting Sino-American rivalry, and they are thus compelled to define their own position therein. Yet we know little about how Europeans have dealt with the security implications of China's rise. The existing scholarly literature has often assumed that European foreign policies towards the PRC have been driven by a naïve and self-interested focus on the economic opportunities offered by this large and emerging market, largely ignoring security considerations. This book challenges such conventional wisdom. Through a detailed examination of the policies of France, Germany, and the United Kingdom, it shows that China's shifting foreign policy behavior as an exogenous driver has affected their national threat perceptions and economic interests, which in turn has influenced the policy goals and the policy instruments mobilized in the pursuit of these goals. In the 1990s and 2000s, in light of China's restrained and low-key foreign policy, Europeans displayed a low threat assessment, and indeed looked at the PRC primarily through economic lenses. However, China's growing assertiveness after 2009, and national policymakers' perceptions of it, has been the key driver of change in their policies toward Beijing. Throughout the 2010s, heightened threat perceptions of China, coupled with increasingly competitive bilateral economic relations with the PRC, have gradually and cumulatively caused the hardening of their policy goals, which in turn translated into the formulation of new, more stringent policy instruments to confront such a challenge. In short, as a result of Beijing's growing assertiveness in the Asia-Pacific, in Europe and beyond, the major European powers have awakened to the security challenges posed by the rise of China. To substantiate this argument, the book relies upon a large body of previously undisclosed primary written and oral sources to examine the evolution of the policies of Europe's major powers vis-à-vis China since 1989 in two key regions. First, it analyzes their response to China's increasingly muscular regional posture in the Asia-Pacific through the development of diplomatic and security initiatives with partners in the region. Second, it delineates how they have confronted China's inroads into Europe, looking at the measures that they have taken to tackle the security challenges posed by Chinese investments in and supply of technologies in strategic sectors, such as critical national infrastructures, dual-use technologies, and in the digital domain, including 5G networks. Admittedly, the question of how Europe's major powers wrestle with the security challenges posed by China's rise goes beyond these two regions. How they respond to China's growing influence in Africa, the Middle East, or Central Asia, as well as in global governance issues, for example climate change or non-proliferation, is certainly relevant. Yet this book focuses on a circumscribed but crucial dimension of this larger question, namely two key regions in which China's behavior impinges upon the national security of Europe's major powers. In the Asia-Pacific, Beijing's territorial disputes and contested sovereignty claims in the East and South China Seas, its growing regional might, and the ensuing geopolitical tensions threaten to destabilize the regional balance of power, as well as vital sea lines of communication, SLOCs, upon which Europe's economic prosperity increasingly relies. Although China's contestation of the regional order in the Asia-Pacific may not be seen as crucial to European security, this region is today a pivot of international politics, where China's leverage and influence are the most robust and direct, and is thus central to any discussion about the foreign and security policies of European major powers, and about their role in world politics. The second area explored in this book is a mirror image of the first. China's inroads in the European continent itself, through aggressive investments in sensitive technologies, is where the rise of China has been most directly felt by Europeans, in that it has fueled rising national security concerns over the protection of strategic sectors. China's foothold on the continent has widened through, among others, increased foreign direct investments, FDIs, including in sensitive areas such as dual-use sectors and critical national infrastructures, and the supply of advanced telecommunications equipment for Europe's digital infrastructure by companies linked to the Chinese state, such as Huawei. And while this domain may not be considered as key to the larger debate about the geopolitical implications of China's rise in world politics, it is increasingly central to any European discussions on how to confront the PRC. The common denominator in both regions is that China has displayed an increasingly assertive behavior in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, and especially after 2009, as shown by a large body of literature. Undeniably, as further detailed in this book, Chinese assertiveness has exhibited partly different characteristics in the two regions. In the Asia-Pacific, Beijing moved away from the low-key regional posture of the 1990s and 2000s, and sought to expand its geopolitical and economic clout within its home region with the goal of establishing a Sinocentric regional order. In faraway Europe, Chinese assertiveness has largely taken the form of a deeper and more pervasive economic foothold on the continent, with aggressive acquisitions in strategic sectors, and in the resulting enhanced political leverage over some European countries. Yet in both regions, Chinese behavior has stemmed from a common driver: the growing capabilities and the ambition of the leadership in Beijing to expand the country's reach and influence globally. The cross-regional analysis put forward in this book aims to shed light on how the major European powers have perceived the security challenges posed by China's rising assertiveness, and to compare the combination of diplomatic, military, and industrial policy instruments they have mobilized in response thereto, both in Europe and in the Asia-Pacific. Rather than primarily focusing on the relations between the European Union and China, Awakening to China's Rise takes as its analytical compass the comparative study of national foreign and security policies. As detailed next, most of the existing studies on European foreign and security policy towards the PRC tend to concentrate on European Union-China relations, overlooking the thorough analysis of the national policies that underpin the EU Common Foreign and Security Policy, CFSP, if and when such common policy exists. Yet the management of European foreign and security policies towards China, especially in policy areas linked to national security, like those examined in this book, largely remains the prerogative of nation-states rather than of the European Union. As stated by the Treaty on European Union, TEU, which sets out the EU's goals and principles, national security remains the sole responsibility of each member state, Article 4. Therefore, it is necessary to turn the dominant analytical lens of the literature upside down, and to give analytical precedence to the comparative study of national foreign and security policies. To be sure, since some competencies that are relevant for the purpose of this study are located at the EU level, such as in the domain of FDIs, this book also examines those instances in which the major European powers have sought to cooperate through or with EU institutions. Nonetheless, it gives analytical precedence to the comparative analysis of national foreign and security policies, and then examines whether, and to what extent, individual countries have channeled their policies and cooperated through and with EU institutions. In this comparative endeavour, the book does not examine the policy responses of all European states to China's rise, but rather focuses on Europe's three major powers, that is, France, Germany, and the United Kingdom, the Big Three. These three countries are the major diplomatic, economic, and military powers in Europe, and are all NATO allies. Furthermore, they are the only European countries with the diplomatic, economic, and military capabilities that would be required to sustain a political military engagement in the Asia-Pacific region, and they have also been the largest recipients of Chinese FDIs in Europe. Contribution to the literature. Despite the rise of China as a major world power and its substantial national security ramifications for Europe, this dimension of European foreign and security policy has long been neglected in the international relations, IR, and security studies literature. A voluminous body of scholarship has investigated when and how the United States rebalanced its foreign and security policy towards the Asia-Pacific, as well as the reordering of Washington's alliances and security partnerships in the region to confront the PRC. The response by Asia-Pacific countries to China's expanding regional clout and ambitions, and their alignment behaviour, have similarly been the subject of a burgeoning literature. By contrast, the question of how Europe's major powers have sought to confront the security implications of China's rise, comparing their policies both in Europe and in the Asia-Pacific, largely remains a blind spot in the scholarly literature. Most existing studies on European foreign and security policies focus on transatlantic relations, or on Europe's near abroad, namely Russia and the Eastern neighbourhood, or the Middle East and Northern Africa. And while a growing body of literature has touched upon various aspects of European foreign and security policies towards China and in the Asia-Pacific, these works nonetheless display several major shortcomings. For one, as previously mentioned, they focus almost exclusively on European Union-China or European Union-Asia relations, largely neglecting the in-depth analysis of national foreign and security policies. Secondly, the few studies that have focused on the foreign and security policies towards China of individual European states have often been limited to one discrete dimension, most notably arms exports. Likewise, whereas Chinese investments in European strategic sectors have attracted scholarly attention, no monograph has scrutinized the foreign and security policies of European states in the Asia-Pacific in the face of a rising China. Existing works have mostly focused on Europeans' approaches towards non-traditional security issues in the Asia-Pacific, for example climate change or humanitarian disasters, rather than towards China's rise. Finally and crucially, the existing literature has stressed how European foreign policies towards the PRC have been mainly driven by economic interests rather than by security concerns. What Nicola Casarini refers to as the prioritization of commercial relations as the basis for the upgrading of political relations, a point also emphasized by numerous other scholars. Yet, as shown in this book, in the 2010s, because of China's rising assertiveness, the major European powers' threat perceptions of the PRC intensified, and, combined with increasingly competitive economic relations with Beijing, produced a significant policy shift. Accordingly, through a novel cross-regional comparison, Awakening to China's Rise delivers the first post-Cold War history of how the main European powers have responded to the national security challenges posed by the rise of China, looking at both Europe and the Asia-Pacific. By investigating this strategically crucial yet neglected dimension of the foreign and security policy of Europe's major powers, this book thus fills an important gap in the scholarly literature on both European and Asia-Pacific security dynamics. Its findings also shed new light on the assets that Europe's major powers can bring to bear in the formulation of a common European policy towards China, on the repercussions of Brexit, and on the implications thereof for the prospect of a joint transatlantic strategy vis-à-vis China. Primary sources. To do so, the book relies on a broad and unique collection of primary written and oral sources. The written sources are presented in the bibliography by category of source. For one, it draws on a large range of interviews. 223 interviews were conducted with senior officials in Europe, Berlin, Brussels, London, Paris, in the United States, Washington, D.C., and in Asia, Beijing, Shanghai, New Delhi, Seoul, between January 2013 and December 2021. The interviewees include civilians and military policymakers with responsibilities for relations with China and the Asia-Pacific, political military affairs, digital technology and/or investment screening mechanisms in the ministries of Foreign Affairs, Defense, Interior and Economics/Industry, in embassies in the Asia-Pacific and in the United States, in the interagency coordinating bodies in charge of politico-military affairs, in the respective intelligence communities, and in the national military staffs, including chiefs of defence staffs. They also include advisors in the offices of the British Prime Minister, of the French President and Prime Minister, and of the German Chancellor and President, as well as officials in the European Commission and the European External Action Service, EEAS, the European Union's diplomatic service. Interviews were also conducted with representatives of the high-tech industry, of its business associations, and of the national chambers of commerce in China. Second, the book relies upon previously undisclosed, declassified archival documents retrieved in various national archives located in France, Germany, and the United Kingdom. Specifically, these archives include the French Centre of Diplomatic Archives in Nantes, CADN, the Political Archive of the German Federal Foreign Office, PAAA, and the National Archives, TNA, of the United Kingdom. Data on the United Kingdom's military presence in the Asia-Pacific were also obtained from the British Ministry of Defence through several Freedom of Information requests under the Freedom of Information Act, FOIA, as well as in the MOD's annual location statistics for UK regular service and civilian personnel. Third, this study leverages a large body of diplomatic cables leaked by WikiLeaks/Cablegate, 1990 to 2010. These cables bring to light the debates and the key considerations therein between the diplomats of the three European countries and their American counterparts over their respective foreign and security policies towards China. Dozens of relevant cables were found in the WikiLeaks/Cablegate archive, including documents to and from the State Department and the U.S. embassies in Beijing, Brussels, The Hague, Madrid, Paris, Rome, Stockholm, Vienna, the American Institute in Taiwan, and the U.S. mission to the European Union. The data gathered through these leaked diplomatic cables provide valuable evidence on British, French, and German policymakers' threat perceptions of China, on their policy responses thereto, and on their consultations with the US over the PRC, especially in the 2000s and early 2010s. 2010. In this book, only part of this large body of documents is referenced. Fourth, this monograph draws upon a comprehensive examination of more than 540 executive branch publications, parliamentary reports, national policymakers' speeches, and their statements in front of parliamentary committees and subcommittees with responsibilities for the Asia-Pacific, European affairs, and investments. For the United Kingdom, public statements were also found in the House of Commons Hansard, that is, the verbatim reports of what is said in Parliament. While the bulk of the executive branch and parliamentary publications used in this book revolves around the Big Three and the European Union, these sources encompass a much wider range of countries that also include Australia, India, Japan, the Netherlands, the People's Republic of China, Singapore, the United States, as well as international and regional organizations such as the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, or the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, among others. Finally, the book provides new data on the naval deployments in the Asia-Pacific by the capital ships of the three European powers' navies by combining the available primary and secondary sources. The data include the type and name of these capital ships and the missions and dates in which they were deployed. For France, the data were retrieved from the magazine of the French Navy, Col Bleu. For the United Kingdom and Germany, they were both obtained from the websites of their respective ministries of defence and from existing secondary sources. This study also systematically gathered and presents data from a variety of existing databases on trade, investments, and arms transfers between the Big Three and China and in the Asia-Pacific, and on European Union-China investment ties. To be sure, each of these primary sources entails specific challenges and limitations. Interviewees may distort facts, either willingly to hide certain details or to bolster their image, or unwillingly because of imprecise memories. Likewise, the available archival sources are partly fragmentary, especially because, given the time frame examined in this book, only few have so far been declassified. Furthermore, government publications and public speeches and statements by policymakers may seek to provide an official version of events with a view to influencing domestic and/or foreign audiences. And although the diplomatic cables leaked by WikiLeaks provide unredacted and still classified primary sources, they are produced by one specific individual bureaucracy, namely the U.S. Department of State headquarters or one of its embassies, and the views presented in the diplomatic cable might well differ from those of other bureaucracies. Additionally, it is not possible to gauge, simply from reading a cable, its relative importance in the decision-making process within that department or within the whole government, or whether the descriptions of Europeans' policy positions in such cables are accurate. To address the challenges posed by each type of source, the validity and reliability of the information provided by individual sources was corroborated by triangulating and contextualizing them with a broad variety of other written and oral sources. Furthermore, the 223 interviews conducted for this book offer a critical mass that allows verifying and cross-checking the reliability of a single source or piece of evidence. By leveraging such a wide range of primary sources, the ambition of this book is to provide the most comprehensive analysis to date of the three major European powers' foreign and security policies towards the People's Republic of China since the end of the Cold War. Outline of the book. Awakening to China's Rise is divided into two parts, each one examining how the major European powers have coped with China's growing might and ambitions in one key region, that is, the Asia-Pacific and Europe respectively. Part 1 analyzes the range of bilateral diplomatic and security ties with Asian partners, multilateral security regimes and defense capabilities that have been leveraged by the Big Three to confront China's increasingly muscular regional posture in the Asia-Pacific. Part 2 focuses on the measures taken by these three countries to tackle China's mounting foreign direct investments in sensitive sectors and its supply of technologies for digital infrastructures in Europe. In particular, it looks at their screening mechanisms of Chinese FDIs and at the measures taken to protect Europe's digital infrastructure from suppliers of concern, notably telecommunications companies with ties to the Chinese state and its intelligence services, such as Huawei. For analytical purposes, the book thus separately scrutinizes how the Big Three have confronted China in each region. Yet their policies towards the PRC in Europe and in the Asia-Pacific are clearly intertwined. They are but two sides of the same coin. Through this cross-regional comparison, Part 1 and Part 2 combinedly aim to provide an all-round picture of how Europe's major powers have grappled with the re-emergence of China as a major power in world politics. Each part is subdivided into a short introduction that outlines the drivers and characteristics of China's rising assertiveness in the region under investigation, and three country-focused chapters then examine the policy response by each major European power. The conclusion of the book synthesizes its core findings on the policies of Europe's three major powers towards China across both continents, and based upon such findings, discusses new important avenues for future research, at a time when the European Union and NATO have recalibrated their approaches towards the PRC, amidst mounting United States-China strategic competition, and the implications of Brexit, therefore. In each chapter, Awakening to China's Rise addresses four standardized questions, each one corresponding to a section. 1. Economic interests. What are the country's economic interests at play? 2. Threat perceptions. What is the national assessment of the security implications of China's rise? 3. Policy goals. What are the policy goals devised in light of such threat assessments and economic interests? 4. Policy instruments. What policy instruments have been mobilized to achieve these policy goals? Structuring each chapter around...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?